Sihombing. I am college student from Mathematics Education Study Program 2019 at State University of Medan. In this video, I will explain about Chapter 8 is Euclid's concept development. The Euclidean tradition, the first is antiquity and the middle age. Euclid's elements in 13 books were probably written in the 3rd century BC, drawing together materials from a more ancient mathematical tradition, and surely underwent several changes and modifications already during the Hellenistic age. Several centuries later, the mathematician Terence of Alexandria, 4th century AD, prepared an edition of the elements which had a great importance in the following tradition of the text. The oldest extant copies of the element are, however, Byzantine manuscripts dating back to the beginning of the 9th century. Later Greek manuscripts were in circulation among scholars during the Renaissance and, in fact, provide the Greek textbook, the first edition of Euclid in the modern world. One further important manuscript was discovered only at the beginning of the 19th century by Francis Pepperell, and it apparently contained a version of the element older than any other, and probability representing theories editing of Euclid. At least it seems that its author has access to about Theonine and non-Theonine manuscript. It should be remarked that his statement, endorsed by many scholars, has been challenged by some others. Signor or 1996, it is still considered the best guess which we process regarding the original from the Euclid work, and has been employed by the Danish philosopher Johann Lochherbeck to prepare the only critical edition of the elements 1883 until 1916 that we currently have. For a story of the Greek text of the element, see for instance Remove et al. 2001, some principle among the 14 or 15 contained in the oldest manuscript, however, came to be considered superior already in late antiquity and probably 15th century. The author of the crucially important commentary on the first book of the elements informs us that a number of them were in effect later in posterity. Modern philosophy is a separate opinion and attempt to prove, even if different groups, that some of the principles must have been added in the ancient transmission of the text. A large but not unanimously endorsed opinion among scholars in the Euclid original had only the principle, 5 postulates and 5 combinations, while the other axiom and Hellenistic edition. A few fragments of it, moreover, circulate in the commentary to the element written by Prosud, whose text enjoy only a very limited circulation in the Middle Ages, but was rediscovered in the Renaissance. Simulation Simplus commentary to the element 6th century was extensive, read in the Arabic-speaking world, but was later lost. A few of the axioms added in the Middle Age, the reasoning in which differ from the Greek commentaries and from Heron in particular, are as the philosopher and simply did not dare to add their own principle to the most perfect work of Euclid. During the early Middle Age, knowledge of Euclid disappeared from the West except for a few fragments preserved in an elementary mathematical work attributed to Botanus, but Florence is the Islamic work. The elements were translated into Arabic twice, in the early 9th century by Al-Hajjal, and again a few years later by Is, and unite a better version than Al-Hajjal, serviced by the Greek mathematician Tabit in Quran. These editions were translated from Greek manuscript that were not every similar to those which we still possess, and thus presented the extended system of principle 14 or 15 of them, which were already common in Greek late antiquity. In the 10th century, the mathematician Andriani wrote an important commentary on Euclid, drawing on symbols that heralds endorsed by others' new edition assumption. The elements of Euclid reappeared in the West in the first half of the 12th century, when a dearth of Bard translated into Latin and Arabic manuscript containing a modified version of Al-Hajar translation. And that edition was followed by several others, translations made from similar Arabic and thus with similar principle, and by the different translation of the East, Acute version made by Gerardo de Seminagerardo, however, also translate commentary, and this paved the way of reworking of the Euclidean axiomatic. Already in the edition of John's of Theomet, a few new principles were added the beginning of book 7 on the element, which were partly from the now in the 13th century. Company de Dovara added a final version of the Euclid of medieval tradition, collating together several previous translation and independent work to fashion a highly successful edition of the elements. It contained 16 geometrical principles in book 1 and 14 arithmetical principles in book 7. Company's version was widely used in the following centuries, and it was the first addition to the elements to be printed in 1482, and B, the Resonance Companus edition and its axioma system were used several times is in the following century. Luca Pacioli produced an improved version of it, and Niccolò Tartaglia translated into Italian in 1543. Tartaglia a few axiom cerebi. Tartaglia's edition inaugurated the translation of Euclid into modern language and was followed by the Alexander translation is German, Forcadell's into French 1564, Billingsley into English 1570, Jamoranos into Spanish 1576, and Dos into Dutch 1600. In the meantime, Greek manuscripts had begun to arrive in Europe, and Bartolomeo Zamerti had translated the element into Latin directly from the Greek 1505, thus opening a new era in the philological reception of the text. In the 1533, Simon Ginares published the edition primes of the Greek text. The latter edition, products of the basic of the Greek text, once again proposed the ancient system of principle which featured no arithmetical axiom nor any of the future correction by math company. Greene's edition, however, was based on a Greek manuscript that probability following process hint changed the division between postulate and axioma and only limited three postulates P1, P2, P3, E8 and correlate constituents, listing the others P4, P5, P8. Among the axiom, generous in the fact, even invented an edition of the closest commentary of Euclid text, so that the system of principle contained in the edition principle of the element was in fact a Neoplatonic philosophical construction. In any case, Ginaeus' edition of the Greek text remained the only and available for a very long time, and most of the pedagogical edition of Euclid in Latin or in modern language which were prepared in the following two countries simply followed Ginaeus' eldest system of axioma and postulate. Cameron's scalable Grachin cylinder, the Sipodius for Chandel Doherian Kale, Federico Comandino Published in 1572 his Latin and Italian version of Euclid, which was based on different Greek manuscript and was in many respects more correct than generous edition, even though common produced no edition of the Greek text itself, even it Gomanio surely had important pedagogical aims. He was also understanding mathematical and under several changes in the axioma system which had been found necessary by the preceding tradition, adding a few further modifications himself. They added for the first time certain axiom in the book 5 and book 10 is element. The very remarkable outcome is edition of Euclid, which certainly philological, not thus ever much richer in foundation, total of 39 axiom and postulate, and many subsequent editions both in the Latin and in others modern language in the course of the 7th and 8th century were similar to the best on Commandian's text. In the Jesuit mathematician Christophe Clavin's published another crucially important edition of Euclid in Latin. Clavius' edition was by the longest and most complete edition on the elements ever produced and was accompanied by a very comment that called almost everything that had been published about the Euclid text in previous counter. For this reason, Euclid became the reference for any further discussion on the foundation of geometry in the following 100 years, and easily the most important edition is Euclid that was ever published. Clavius believed that was important and had to be preserved, but that mathematical persuasion was a high aim. His compromise went further than Commandian's correct Euclid. In the 1589 edition of his commentary, Clavius added alleged proof of the parallel postulate, together with a few reflections of his art, and this episode marked the beginning of the rich efforts of the attempts to prove the parallel postulate in Europe, an approach that culminated in the 18th century with the subsequent discovery of non-Euclid geometry, which was to remain a milestone in the following developments. Contained 4 postulates and 20 axioms in Book 1, Elementary Plane Geometry, 1 axiom in Book 5, The Theory of Proportion, 3 postulates and 12 axioms in Book 7, Arithmetic, and 1 postulate and the 3 axioms in Book 10, Irrational Magnitudes, and C. The 7th cantor. The 7th cantor was the most creative age in the invention and development of the principle for geometry and arithmetic, and in many respects the highest point of research into the foundation of mathematics in the early modern age, following an age in which the main goal is meant to be that of the restitution of the accurate text of the ancient mathematical work after the corruption of the middle, the new concept, the animate improvement of the elements beyond what Euclid himself had been able to do. To this effect, several complete new systems of axioms were defined in order to grow elementary mathematics. This innovative line attack to ancient texts was especially popular in French and Italy. We may mention in this connection Herigon's edition of the Elements 1634, which contains for many axioms and postulate the greater part of them being actions of the Euclid notion. The edition by Claude Richard 1645 with 46 principles mostly dealing with geometry and introduction a few topological axioms to guarantee the continuity of the figure and the extent of their intersection point. Richard was a Jesuit, and like him, other French Jesuit masters continue Clavius' work on the foundations of mathematics with the additional aim of producing pedagogically efficient handbooks of geometry. Among their most remarkable outcomes, we may mention Euclid's radical reform of the element and their principle, as well as the work by Dessalles and Fabry on the other sides of the political religious divide of the day. The Johnson's theological and wrong an important new working of elementary mathematics. 1667, 1683, which also include many new axioms, 42 in total, and was followed by several editions inspired by Lamy. Italian studies on Euclid axiomatic were mostly carried on by the school of Galileo and concentrated especially on the reform of the theory of representation, since Galileo himself had attempts such as construction, and the topic was central to his project of the mathematication of mechanics. It's to be categorically Borelli, Viviani, Giordano, and Marsetti that we mainly own the progress made in this field as compared to the French tradition. This Italian axiomatization show less creative in the production new axioms. Economy of principle. From a prological point of view, some of these books may be considered to the culmination of logical reflection of the elements, and Borel's Euclid's Restitutus in particular marks a high point in research on the founders of mathematics. The fourth is the 18th century. In the 18th century, the foundational discourse on mathematics shift for the most part outside the scope of the elements. Most efforts were now dedicated to the many issues raised by the new calculus, and reflection on the foundation of mathematics of often aimed rather of justifying an employment of infinitive or infinitesimal, however, are seldom to be found in an edition of Euclid. Even elementary mathematics is from time to time grounded on difference principle, and algebra, for instance, override the possibility of a dissimilar foundational approach grounded in symbolic manipulation rather than simple geometrical construction. The elements were no longer regarded as the proper place for advancing a science discussion, but rather just as the most classical handbook for a basic schooling in mathematics. The outcome of this modified approach was, on the one hand, a growing attention to pedagogical improvement in the teaching of elementary geometry, and thus a proliferation of simple addition for students, and on the other hand, a renovated search for more reliable and pedagogical elements. The pedagogical attitude toward the elements, on the other hand, was especially common in Britain, where David Grant produced an edition which which many be considered to be first improvement on this latter since Greenhouse. Robert seems like published. Okay guys, that's all about Euclid concept development. If you have question and suggestion, you can write in column comment, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video on your social media, and turn on the bell to know notification for my next video. Thank you. See you on my next video. Bye bye.